So we're going to move on to our third challenge of the night, and this one is called dancing. So this one is a slightly more complicated challenge, but that's fine. We'll go through it slowly. So click on the task, click on the challenge over here, and we're going to need to spawn the machine again. So click on spawn machine, and that's going to initialize the virtual machine. It's going to take between a minute or two to fully initialize. So our target machine is finished initializing. We want to copy the IP address, so we're just going to click on that, and that's going to copy our IP address. Let's go over to our terminal, and from our terminal we want to ping the system to make sure that it's up. So it's going to be ping C4 and then the IP address. So we use ping with the C4 flag over here to make sure that it only pings 4 times before finishing, because otherwise the ping command is going to keep on going forever, and that's not what we want. So 4 packets were transmitted, 4 received, 0 packet loss. Okay, so the machine is up. So from here we can run our nmap command. So we run nmap with the -vv flag for very verbose output, and that's going to let us see output before the scan finishes. So that's gonna let us react to the results of the scan much faster than if we wait for the entire scan to finish. Next, we use -t4 to run nmap faster. It's going to run on 4 threads. So we generally want to give it a number of threads that is high but not too high, because if we set it too high, then we're going to get a lot of inaccurate results on our nmap scan. So next, we're going to set the port, which ports we want to scan. Initially we do -p- in order to scan every port on the system. So that's going to be from port 1 to port 60,500 something. And then the last thing we do is we supply the IP address, and then we fire off our scan. So first off, we see that we see discovered open ports on 139, on 445, and 135. So this indicates that that this server is running SMB, otherwise known as server message block. We also see a bunch of discovered ports on the 40,000 range over here, which is also typical for Windows machines that are running the RCP service. So that being said, we don't need to wait for the scan to finish, but we can cancel out of the scan, because these are the ports that we need to pay attention to when we're running our subsequent scan. So we're going to run our second nmap scan. Once again, it's very verbose. Once again, it's 4 threads, but now it's on specific ports, 139 and 445 and 135. And then we're going to set it to return the version of the services, as well as to run any default scripts on these services once the type of service has been enumerated. Okay, so the last thing we do is we supply the IP address, and then we run our second nmap scan to try to enumerate the open ports. Okay, so let's take a look. So the output says that 135 is MSRSP, and the second port over here is 139, and this is NetBIOS, which is also associated with the SMB service. And port 445 over here is Microsoft DS. Microsoft DS is Microsoft Directory Services, which indicates that this is running in SMB service, server message block. Server message SMB, otherwise known as server message block, is a Windows specific file sharing service. So this is kind of like the FTP service that we found on the previous box, but SMB is the Windows version of file sharing. Okay, so next, now that we know that there's SMB available on this server, we're going to try to enumerate the file shares on this particular server. So we can do that with the SMB client tool, SMB client. So it's going to be SMB client and then -L, and -L is going to list out the file shares. We need to supply the IP address, and then we're going to give it the -N to see if we can enumerate file shares without a valid username and password. So let's run this, so that we see that from the results over here, we see the share names and the types and the comments. So we have to note that that these first three file shares over here are administrator file shares. We know that from the $sign at the end of the file share names, which means that these file shares are probably not file shares that we can access. But there's this extra file share over here called work shares, and we can probably access this. Let's try to access this file share using the SMB client program one more time. So it's SMB client. And then we have to specify the IP address. So it's going to be // and then the IP address, and then another /, and then the name of the file share. In this case, it's work shares, and we're going to access it without a valid username and password with the $N flag. So let's run that. So we're logged in now. We could try typing help to get a list of all possible commands, but inside of SMB, we're usually using Windows commands, in which case we can get the directory list with the dir command. So we see here the dir command, there are two directories in here. There's one called amy.j, and there's a directory called james.p. So let's try going into this directory first, amy.j. So it's going to be cd amy.j. So after we've entered this directory, we're going to dir again. And we see this file over here called worknotes.txt. Let's try downloading this file. We can use the get command just like we did with the FTP server. We use get and then the name of the file, get worknotes.txt, and that's going to download the file to our system. Okay, so next we're going to back out of this directory, cd ... and we're going to enter the other directory, which is james.p, cd james.p, and we're going to take a look at what's in this directory. And there's a file called flag.txt. So let's get this file, get flag.txt. This is probably the objective file for this particular challenge. Okay, awesome. So let's exit out of this server by giving the exit command. All right, So back at our Kali machine over here, we see that we have flag.txt and we have to also have worknotes.txt. Let's read the worknotes.txt file for fun. Okay, start an Apache server on Linux machine, secure FTP server, set WinRM on dancing. Okay, so this is kind of superfluous stuff, but let's read the flag.txt file. And this is the objective for this exercise. All right. So before we copy this over to the challenge, let's finish all the other questions for this challenge first. Question 1 is, what does the 3-letter acronym SMB stand for? So SMB stands for Server Message Block. Okay, the next question is, what port does SMB use to operate at? So there are a few different ports that are associated with SMB, but the main port that is associated with SMB is port number 445. The next question is, what is the service name for port 445 that came up in our Nmap scan? Okay, so we're looking for something S dash something S. So if we go back to our Nmap scan, we see that port 445, the service here is listed as Microsoft-DS. So that's the answer we're looking for. Question number 4, what is the flag or switch that we can use with the SMB client utility to list the available shares on Dancing? Okay, so if you remember, we used a particular flag with SMB client to list out the file shares, and that was -L. The next question is, how many shares are there on Dancing? Okay, so remember that we saw a number of different file shares, but most of the file shares that we saw were administrative file shares, but there was one file share that we could actually access. Altogether, there were 4 file shares. The next question is, what is the name of the share that we were able to access at the end with the blank password? Okay, so if you remember, the name of the file share that we accessed was work shares. And the next question is, what is the command we can use within the SMB shell to download the files we find? Okay, so we downloaded the files that we found inside the SMB file share using the get command. And lastly, we have to submit the root flag. So in the flag.txt file, we found this value right here. So this is what we're going to submit as the flag. Okay, so with that, the dancing machine has been completed. All right, so we just need to click on OK, and we have finished the challenge. Okay, so what did we do in that challenge? So we scanned the machine, and we found that there was an SMB service, SMB file sharing service available on the machine. So we were able to use SMB client, the SMB client program, to first list out the number of file shares, list out the different file shares on the server, and then we were able to log into one of the file shares using no password, because the SMB service was configured so that we could log into that one file share without a password. And then we were able to download the target files, and we were able to get the flag by downloading the files through SMB. All right, so that's the dancing challenge. Hey there, Hacker Frogs! Are you enjoying this workshop? Learning new concepts and skills? If so, there's a way you can support the channel, and it's totally free. Just click on the subscribe button below the video. Also, click on the like button. And if you have questions or comments on this workshop, please leave them below the video. Thanks for listening. And now, back to our scheduled programming.